I'll fix the chat in case anyone decides they want to interact. I miss the old community we had on the other channel, but kind of got stalked and didn't get my material back, and so here we are. Moderation, pretty much none is needed. There we go. All right. So, if you're new here, we talk about the highly strange goings-on since about 2018, since the first big eclipse happened in this set of big eclipses that were 7 years apart. We're going to go ahead and take a break from the geography of this place in which we find ourselves. And this is going to be weird. I try to relate things that I believe are going on in society to you guys, anyone that, I'm a fisher of men, anyone that, straggles in. I try to explain things via pop culture, whether that be movies, books, or music. And so Howard the Duck is a good example, symbolically and literally speaking, maybe, of what we're kind of facing in these times. All are welcome here. The only thing not welcome is hate. I do have a kind of biblical lens, but let me just state this right off the bat. For anyone that doesn't know, I do not believe that the Bible is infallible, and I don't believe that any person is infallible. And I think that's a dangerous road to go down, to be honest with you. And if somebody wants to call me a heretic for that, well, I guess that is their perspective. I am doing my best to help because we are on a search for truth, wherever that may lead us. And so Howard the Duck, we left off yesterday's video with a little bit of talking about aliens or the fallen angels, and an area in the United States that has been brought up many times and prophesied about. And so now let's talk about, kind of, instead of the where, let's talk about how. How is this being done? Now, of course, CERN is going to come into play, but to give you an idea of what the rest of this video is going to include, I am subscribed to Academia EDU, I think it's called. Let me make sure, because I don't want to misinform you guys. Let me open it and read it. Hold, please. Oh, no. All right, so I am subscribed to Academia EDU, and I get journals and updates on papers and essays. And let me tell you about, this one is called Meme Splicing, Genesis 614 and the Apocalypse regarding 2012. Now, why did I pick this paper? It just happened to be in my inbox. Again, I get alerts when the fallen are mentioned, when Egyptian, Babylonian, or demonology is mentioned. I have an alert in my email box go up, and they send me the links so that I can preview these and read them. It's a great resource. I actually really enjoy it. Now, some people might not think that this is real. Now, the lens that this person wrote this from is, they're talking about, how does the 2012 conspiratorial thought process and biblical apocalyptic thought process, how do those work? And how might that actually be applied to our everyday reality? And I'll let them say it in their own words. But again, I wanted to give you an idea of what the video was about. I've given you an intro. Now, why do I talk about these things? First of all, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. No part of this is medical nor legal advice. I'm a mother. In 2018, my family went through a lot. And I couldn't figure out recently, why I was going through so much again spiritually. And it's probably because of what I'm going to talk about today. Lux maxing. You might have never heard of that. You might be a little older like me, but our children know what it is. And so when you get into genetic tinkering, and again, I don't want to, the hybridization, basically, this is what we're talking about. And it doesn't usually involve fornication, much like with the Epstein files and the disclosure that they're giving everybody, that everybody's been asking for, but nobody's looking at that, I don't think, as usual, from the right lens. It's very emotional, which, again, we're angry about certain things. We have a right to be. Now, my children are two people who've been greatly affected by those adults around them, and people that I trusted. And I still don't know exactly what happened. It's not my complete story to tell. But I'm going through things now that I don't think anyone should have to go through, any mother nor any child. My child is an adult, but as a parent, I'm going to always be there for them. When my child, and I think it's ironic that they call rainbow babies, that they call it rainbow babies. When my child was born, he had a few things going on. And rainbow babies, when he turned 16, they said, well, you know, he's a little bit behind in his growth, which I'm only 5 foot. They wanted to give him these hormone injections. And I said, no, I wasn't consenting to such a thing. When you get into this hybridization and when you get into, and again, I'm going to get very strange here, when you get into mankind and the men and women who know what's going on behind the scenes, because these beings live for a very long time. That's why they're into cloning, because our bodies are what they're using now, and they call this possession, right? But it's when these evil spirits, because they're not given bodies after the flood, they take over our bodies, but it has to happen by consent. Now, this is where the genetic tinkering comes in. And so we're going to look at a little bit of this because this is all interrelated. We're going to talk about how this is happening, how this can be possible, a little theoretical conversation. Howard the Duck, I will get to throughout the explaining of the fallen in Genesis 6:1-4 and how science can apply this. Like how we're going to look at this paper through a lens of, let's look at how this was written in 2012 and where we're at today and if it has any relevance. Were people correct in some of their thought processes, but were we just wrong on this time frame? So this is called meme splicing, Genesis 6:1-4. I could not get the link to work to paste it yet. I will fudge with it a little more and include it in the description box. But it's called meme splicing, Genesis 6:1-4 in the Apocalypse of 2012. Paul Thomas, Radford University. We're going to look at this through a lens of, okay, where we're at today. This is the abstract. In the morass that has become the year 2012 apocalyptic thought, and we're not going to read the whole thing because that would be copyright. We're going to hit the important bits. We're just going to scan this and see if we can apply it to some of these things that we're hearing about in places like the Epstein files and in some of these hearings that Congress is having. But again, there's so much happening that I think some people are so busy, and they're emotional, they're worried about how they're feeding their family and all this, that they're missing the bigger picture and what happened in 2019 with the armed cocktails and how that is genetic tinkering. Hi, bot, what's up? And remember, we need to share information because my lens and my story, my cautionary testimony is not every story. And I believe our perspective is the gift that we each have to offer in these times. My story, my experiences, I can tell you, yes, some of this stuff is going on. I know this for a fact. You can call me crazy, you can gaslight me, but I'll at least know that I'm searching and digging for truth. And eventually, everyone that is searching for truth is going to have to face some really uncomfortable things. And again, the Epstein files are disclosing a lot, but people, again, are looking at the wrong things. And this is what the fallen want. Because please keep in mind that some of these accusations as well are false accusations because that's what Satan does. He's the accuser. And a lot of these beings don't care anymore because they have different bodies now. This is science. Like they call this science. Okay, so moving on. In the morass that has become the year 2012 apocalyptic thought, there has emerged a group of authors who are linking the year 2012 Genesis 6:1-4 and cultural fears concerning genetic engineering. And again, keep the CERN LHC in the back of your mind because we're going to touch on that in a few too. And this is not going to be just me reading and boring, We're going to touch on Howard the Duck, and this looks maxing too because again, they're promoting any way that they can tinker, any consent that they can get from you. I would not be doing anything in this time that pierces the skin, and I'm covered in tattoos, and I could not regret it more. I wear my testimony on my skin, and I see people left because of that, and how dare you judge, you know? It's just sad. Anyways, this article examines the manner in which various authors combine these seemingly disparate threads to argue that Genesis 6:1 through 4 is a record of devious, ancient genetic engineering, and that the Bible foretells a time when similar events will herald the coming apocalypse, thought by some to coincide with the year 2012. What if we were just wrong about the year? What if we were just wrong about the year? Because look at everything we're seeing now. I would love it if somebody washed my feet, but people don't treat me like that. It's been a long time since I've experienced human compassion. Looking at this literature is representative of a type of improvisational millennialism. And yes, we use big words on this channel. And my videos are a little longer. I encourage people to take the bits that I give you, make shorter videos, make them more consumable. That's part of my process in what I have to offer is, you know, helping us all to increase our patience, which is patience is the portal. It is the doorway to all the other virtues. And virtue is how your gifts and your connection to God work. This is why the fallen use our bodies and our vessels, and their Kabbalah, their tree of life, does not have the extension at the top because they don't have that connection from their mind and their heart to the one that made them anymore. They've been cut off. If you want to talk about the vine, they've been cut off at the vine. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and take a quick look at this and talk about CERN as we go through some of this. Now it says, for some, scientific curiosity is not always a good thing. A lesson learned by Harry Goodman in the fictional Christ clone trilogy. After all, scientific inquiry leads Harry to recover DNA from drops of blood on the famed Shroud of Turin. Genetic engineering made it possible to clone an individual from the recovered DNA. Now, this is a book they're talking about. Does this lead to the return of Jesus Christ on earth or debunking of the divinity of Christ? Neither happens. Rather, these events set into motion the advent of the Antichrist and the onset of the apocalyptic end of days. Now, again, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters what we believe and where we stand. But when we're talking about the script that you're seeing on mainstream TV, they're never going to come out and tell you the truth. And if they do, much like they're doing now, you're going to see everything that they're releasing, like demon syndrome. That is just damage control for what people are already experiencing and seeing for themselves. They want you to deny your own eyes, ears, and senses. And yeah, you shouldn't trust them completely because perspective is everything, but you need to go inward at this time for the answers because truth rings like a bell. It resonates. It has its own frequency. And if you are walking in that frequency yourself, you know when these deceivers are trying to deceive you. So it says many cultural products in recent years have warned humanity about the pitfalls of scientific endeavors such as genetic engineering. While films such as Splice, I don't recommend that one, it was horrid, but if you've not seen Howard the Duck, you need to, because again, we'll talk about the how of all this in a minute. Species and Daniel Steele's The Clone are not as cosmic in scale as the Christ Clone trilogy. Such products still reflect cultural anxiety. Okay, at first blush, the Bible passage, Genesis 6:1 through 4, which tells the story of the mating of the sons of God with the daughters of men, genetic engineering, and apocalyptic year 2012 speculation make an eclectic triumvirate. However, the apocalyptic imagination is able to make sense of these connections through the influence of conspiratorial thought. Now, again, we've passed this time. This is why I don't read to you guys everything that I get, trust me. But this, looking back on it and where we are now, knowing what you know about the Epstein files, he said he wanted, people think that's just narcissism, that he wanted to inject his DNA into this, that, and the other. For arm cocktails, they're still using the same DNA from 1972 that it's been cloned that many times. Had I known this information when I was younger and when my children were born, I would have had a midwife. I wouldn't have done any of this. No part of this is medical advice. I'm not a medical professional. I'm talking about my testimony, my personal experience to hopefully help you. Now it says, in arguing the apocalypse, a theory of millennial rhetoric, 1994, Stephen O'Leary offers a theoretical framework that suggests how Genesis 6:1 through 4, the year 2012, and genetic engineering may become linked in the apocalyptic imagination. He states apocalyptic functions as a symbolic theodicy, a mythical and rhetorical solution to the problem of evil. Now, that's, again, we're going to move a little past this. We're just skimming and scamming right now. Now it says connecting, pay attention here, because this is where you should think of CERN. Connecting Genesis 6:1 through 4 with the year 2012 paradoxically collapses both the near future and the distant past while expecting the relentless forward linear thrust of time, ending in the throes of a coming destruction. 2018, 2017, was that not when the ginormous LHC was turned on? And I hope you know that there's a couple of those in America. And I find their location very telling. One of them, or the lab that one of them's connected to, is it Fermilab? I don't want to misspeak, is under Chicago. Like, gee, I wonder why things are so whack there, for lack of, I get a little slangish and sometimes, because this stuff is very personal to me too. And we're going to touch on looks maxing in a second. It says, Hillel Schwartz speaks of millennial subjects as embodying the French proverb reculer pour mieux sauter, or backing up so as to leap ahead. I'll read that again, that quote. Backing up, think of time, so as to leap ahead. Everybody thinks that time is going faster now. Here's the thing. They might want you to think that. They might be, and I know they're doing this for a fact, and I've talked about this. I'm so glad, again, this one is taking off on TikTok too. I think I did a video on it like 2 years ago about how my time was different on the clocks that I manually set than their, world clock that all the cell phones go by. And we theorized on this channel, how many minutes could they cut off in a day? How much time would they end up with? Because here's the thing. Talking about the lore of this, allegedly, the women who have these babies, the gestation period is not 9 months. And they grow, or they develop and mature quicker. Not in the mind, but physically, okay? Follow me here. They grow up quicker. And some days they can look 50, and some days they look 12. This is what happens when you tinker, because, again, angels have this shape-shifting ability, and I told you this was going to get strange. Now, they're talking about backing up so as to leap ahead. Indeed, the subjects of this work, authors of apocalyptic alternative history, who see Genesis 6:1 through 4, clues to our apocalyptic future, follow a venerable model established by various religious groups who have maintained that looking backwards facilitates looking forward. Here we go with some more talk about retrocausality. And once again, they want you to think everything is perverted and gross. This is time. Don't think of Epstein type stuff when you see a spiral. Not all the time. This is time. This is what time really looks like. It's not linear, but it's set out like this, like a deck of cards. But like that, and each dot is an event. And so things repeat. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but things are cyclical. We do have free will, but for some reason, certain things are repetitious, or at least they're foreshadowed and then they play out. Now, I've been looking everywhere since I started this second channel for actual, and I out-researched myself and I did it wrong, because I keep looking for second incarnation of the fallen ones. Maybe I'm looking up the wrong series of words there, but I've not been able to get exact proof that this is going to happen again. But like they're saying here, we know that certain things are cyclical, and we are told it will, the closest I've gotten is the verse, it will be as the days of Noah. And the genetic tinkering, think of them as bookends, right? The one punishment and then the final punishment. And people wonder why they haven't been judged yet. Why are they stuck in Tartarus, which is Tartaria? Again, they have they have a lot of people in angel worship right now, and they don't even realize they're doing it. And that's going to follow right into the Antichrist too. I lost that thought. Sometimes that happens. All right, so let's move on a little bit. Okay, so Thomas Horn, IDE Thomas, Patrick Heron, and Marzulli use a rhetorical strategy that relies upon constructing an authoritative mode of interpretation, a self-described literalist reading strategy, and a rhetoric of conspiracy to produce an apocalyptic vision whereby certain portions of the Bible are combined in an improvisational millennial stew. Other important ingredients in this stew are a healthy suspicion of scientific endeavors such as cloning and a milieu informed by speculation about the year 2012. Now here's the thing. Looking at today, where we are at, would you agree with the person who wrote this essay? That it's conspiratorial thought? Well, conspiracy is just anything that includes more than one person talking together. But looking at where we're at today, would you hold the same views that this person does at this time? No, this aged poorly, because we are seeing we have every right and should be very suspicious of certain scientific endeavors. Oh, that's gross. Yeah. Among those looking back in order to see ahead are recent authors of apocalyptic alternative history who see Genesis 6:1 through 4 clues to our apocalyptic future during or near the year 2012. Now, 2018 is just 6 years ahead of 2012. 2017 was 5 years ahead. Whatever happened, whatever technology that they lost during the flood in that antediluvian time, I believe they found again, and that's why they went forward with all of this arms stuff in 2019, because if you consent to this stuff, you're facing this genetic manipulation. I apologize. I had such a backache all night, and I was up a lot. And again, I couldn't figure out why I was facing such just pushback with stuff, but they don't want these things talked about. They don't want you knowing about the children that are already here everywhere, that are of, look at Trump's son, look at Barron. And again, I'm not here to make anyone feel bad or judge their salvation or lack thereof. But obviously, we're not all made the same. And it causes a lot of problems when we do this, when we try to intervene with nature. And they also have a lot of people right now, you're going to say, Jen, why aren't you talking about this war? What did we learn by reading Enoch? That the fallen ones are the ones that taught us the art of warfare. Our warfare is up here and in here, and in how we present that if we're serving others through love. Sitting around and talking about warfare strategy when they have thousands of people in these chats, they have you where they want you. We're not supposed to be doing these things. They taught it to us the first time. We weren't supposed to learn any of these things. So Bible believers, people that say they're Bible believers, why are you doing this? Why are you allowing them to influence you like that and sit here and basically be a worshiper and a propagator of war when you know the fallen ones are the ones that taught us the art of warfare? We shouldn't be involved. God's people, the ones who want to be God's people, the ones who want to be moralistic and try to follow natural law, the ones like me who have fallen from grace and know it's not the way, we shouldn't be worshiping the warfare talk. We shouldn't be in those chats. We should not participate. This is the whole point. This is why it was wrong in the first place. We weren't supposed to learn these things. So why is everybody still messing around with it? I know I understand that Pandora's box has been opened and the genie is out of the bottle, so to speak. However, when our men and women sign up for that, they are signing up to be sacrifices. They're consenting to it. And their parents who propagate and try to encourage their children to go ahead and follow in their footsteps so they can become a sacrifice. And for what? And then a lot of times, again, if you give consent, things like the 2019 push for you to get your skin broken, I would not be allowing any of that at this time. And I have tattoos, and I would say no, do not do anything that is invasive at this time. That's my personal opinion. This is speculation. I'm not a doctor. That's what I'm doing. That's how I'm walking this out. So we know that it's not unheard of to look back to kind of see what's happening today. It's important for understanding eschatological events. For authors such as Thomas Horn, the sons of God in Genesis 6:1-4 are heavenly beings or fallen angels who, quote, engaged in experiments resulting in race of mutant offspring called the Nephilim. Not only did this ancient, quote, genetic tinker, unquote, have a dramatic effect upon the events that immediately followed, including the degradation of the earth and its subsequent cleansing by flood. Humanity will once again in the near future face the sons of God and the consequences of their genetic experimentation, perhaps disguised as malicious alien visitors or seemingly benevolent ETs. Alien angst, why Genesis 6:1-4? It is a curious thing that such abbreviated episodes should become the object of apocalyptic thought. Now, everyone knows this verse. I'll go ahead and read it, and then we're going to skim ahead a little more because there's a lot of interesting stuff that I just want you to know is in here, and you can read it for yourself if you want to. And then we'll move to the looks maxing, how that's connected, and we'll end with Howard the Duck and how this all connects. Okay. And it came to pass that humankind began to multiply upon the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. The sons of God saw the daughters of men were fair, and they took in marriage for themselves. They didn't take them in marriage. They took for themselves wives of their choosing, not of the women's choosing. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not dwell in man forever, for they are flesh, and their days shall be 120 years. How old was Moses when he died? 120 years. Anyone that teaches this different is lying and deceiving you on purpose. Mankind was promised 120 years that God's spirit would walk with you. But then he will no longer inhabit your vessel. Once that much time has come to pass, that's how much time you got to walk the earth, pre-flood. Follow me here. A lot of people are saying, well, it was 120 years until the flood. Then that's not true. That's not true. Noah was promised 120 years, but then the Spirit of God would vacate. How old was Moses when he died? 120. He sat down and died at 120 years and was not allowed in paradise. But he might not have walked in paradise when he was alive. But what happened next? Saint Michael the Archangel, according to the story, Saint Michael the Archangel fought Lucifer for the body of Moses. Your body, your temple, is so much more important than they tell you. I think one of the reasons Lucifer was fighting for the body of Moses is, one, so it can't be resurrected in the resurrection, and two, because he wanted to infiltrate the body of Moses. He wanted one of his demons, right? Follow me, to possess Moses's body once Moses was done with it. He could have a Trojan horse and have one of his minions as one of the biggest godliest influences of that time. That's why Satan wanted his body. He wanted one of his minions or himself to inhabit Moses' body, because God will leave after 120 years, the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit. Do you follow me? Your bodies are very important, but if you die, right? Say you die or you leave your body and you start this astral projection that they're trying to teach everybody, and you start doing this, your body, if there's nothing too damaged about it, they can inhabit it. And I think that's one of the things we're facing here. That's not the only thing. But that's one of the things you're seeing now, why people have changed, why they've gone to like this polar opposite of what they used to be, is because that human soul is no longer in there. And these evil spirits without bodies, the Nephilim from the flood, they possess our friends, family, loved ones, but first they start with political figures. Gosh, I hope all this is weaving together the way it needs to. Okay, so we're going to skip a little ahead because a lot of us know this bit. And again, we're trying to look back and see how well this aged and what we can learn. In short, Genesis 6:1-4 describes the heavenly sons of God spying from afar the physical beauty of the human daughters of men. and their subsequent descent from the heavens to take from them, quote, wives of their choosing, because they are so, and quote, fair, end quote. Following this event is a notice about Nephilim, quote, on the earth in those days, end quote. The text itself is rather vague concerning the origins of the Nephilim. Now, again, I am not a person who believes that the Bible is infallible. I think that's a dangerous outlook to have because we all interpret it through our own lens. And I have issues with Paul. I've always had issues with Paul. It's not because of what he says about women. Honestly, it's because of his arrogance, and I feel a sense of false humility at times when I read some of his letters to the churches, and that bothers me. And the issue of money bothers me with him because we're told in the, is it the Didache? I always forget the word. In the ancient church fathers document, we're told that a false prophet asks for money, not, if you give them money or you give them meals, that's one thing, but they should not be asking. If they're an actual prophet of God, they won't ask you. Okay, so the Hebrew term Nephilim means fallen ones. It's derived from the verbal root nephal, meaning to fall. This in of itself tells us little beyond suggesting that the Nephilim are degraded as a result of being the offspring of an unsanctioned union between the divine and the human. And this is where you get into the attributes of God. God gives you gifts, right? He gives you talents. It's up to, they're tools. It's up to you in how you use them, whether you apply them, in a godly way, in a natural way, or if you go to the more selfish, dark path with it. But when God gives you these gifts, almost always you get to keep them. It's your decision what side you use them on, all right? So remember that the angels have different attributes than us, and they can shapeshift. That is one of the things that they are able to do. And again, this isn't always done through fornication, but if a fallen one can get consent or permission to enter a human man, then he will live out that human man's life, or at least while he's awake, with that woman and other women, and that's what they do. All right, so we're going to move on a little bit. The Nephilim were imagined as monstrous and destructive giants, follows from the illicit union between the sons of God and the daughters of men. As such, unnatural violations of natural categories often have disastrous consequences in mythological narratives. The same can be said for animals. And again, in nature, we need to learn to just help nature along and be helpmates to the animals and let them help us with our crops and to tame the earth. But we shouldn't be so interfering. That's when we get into a type of unnatural, you're going against natural law. We're intervening and interfering with things that we shouldn't, that don't need our interference, right? They don't need our interference. Okay. In addition to being the fallen ones, intra-biblical references in the ancient testimony of texts, such as 1 Enoch, indicate that the Nephilim were imagined as giants. Numbers 13:32 through 33 links the Nephilim to the so-called Anakim, or the Akkadian, I think, or the Anunnaki, the Sumerians, the giant pharaohs, a race of giants so large that the Israelite spies felt like grasshoppers. The Nephilim, Okay, so we're going to move forward. We know basically why. The Earth's earliest ages are not what you've been led to think. The works of apocalyptic alternative history examined here are derived from peculiar understanding of the past that suggests the history of human technological innovation may not be a ladder of progress. Rather, this vision of the past concedes that technologies employed by ancient civilizations may have surpassed our own. I believe this too. I believe the mud flood pictures is still humanity still digging out after Noah's flood. Can you imagine how devastating that would be? To what proportions? Imagine the whole earth flooded. Imagine skyscrapers underwater. Imagine then, even when the waters recede after however long, imagine all the mold and just all of the issues you would have to deal with things being degraded and looking, being taken back over by nature. And this is why I believe, America is so big. We have so many things that sadly people have not been able to see yet. but we know this. A lot of us know this. And I think that in 2018, 2019, maybe a little bit in 2012 and 2000, like, I don't know, man, since the last 20 years, but the last 10 for sure, they've hit on whatever it is they lost in Atlantis, and it's full steam ahead, and they're triggering the apocalypse, like by doing these things. Let's see. Now we have Von Daniken and Stitchen are mentioned, Graham Hancock. A lot of us are up to date there. Then we have the rhetoric of conspiracy. And he talks about L.A. Marzulli. Right. Now, L.A. Marzulli, he wrote in Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural that most scholars and archaeologists of mainstream will not consider these ideas because it requires, quote, accepting an invasion of our space-time continuum with beings from the spirit world. And this, of course, is unacceptable in our current logic-driven age, end quote. But wait, why? Let's read the description. Now we're going to bounce. Let's read the description of Howard the Duck and see what we can find out through IMDb. I was going to put a picture up in the back of the laser that's in Howard the Duck. But as I'm reading this, I want you to think about CERN a little bit. So this says, a sarcastic humanoid duck is pulled from his home world. Now, I didn't know, like, I stay away from what's trending and what is mainstream to keep my eye gates and ear gates more clean than I used to so they're not corrupted, but also so that I know I'm going inward for answers, I'm praying on things, I'm using my own critical thinking and logical abilities, and what I'm giving you then is not really, I don't know what's trending. Again, I stay away from that stuff, but when I Googled Howard the Duck, I saw that there's recent things going on with that. That's not where I'm at with this. At least I don't think. I don't know what they're talking about, but for me, it is the overall picture. We're going to replace Howard the Duck, right? With Christ, maybe, or Neo. And then these dark overlords that he fights, let's call them the fallen angels, all right, that are on the other side. So just listen to this plot. A sarcastic humanoid duck is pulled from his home world to Earth, where he must stop an alien invasion with the help of a nerdy scientist and a struggling female rock singer. A scientific experiment unknowingly brings extraterrestrial life forms to the Earth through a laser beam. First is the cigar-smoking Drake Howard from the Duck's planet. A few kids try to keep him from the greedy scientist and help him back to his planet, but then a much less friendly being arrives through the beam. Howard, a duck the size of a human child, is accidentally brought to Earth through a laser beam. Oh. Why are you repeating that? So we're going to go... There we go. It begins with Howard the Duck, who lives in a parallel universe that's all ducks. Howard spends his days smoking, drinking, and reading the latest issue of Playduck. One day, he's chilling in his armchair, and it begins to quake violently, and it propels him out of his apartment building into outer space through a portal, guys. Just listen. I know it's a strange premise with a duck, but just replace him with Christ or Neo, and replace the overlords with the fallen. He eventually crosses dimension and ends up in Cleveland, Ohio. I told you Ohio is really big in these end days. The things that are happening here would not be happening. And Netflix told you the devil is in Ohio. It wasn't a joke. Howard, through a beam, is brought to Cleveland, Ohio. And also, there's an Air Force base here with an alleged spaceship. I don't know how true that is. Howard encounters a woman being attacked by thugs. Okay, we're not going to read that whole thing. Let's go to the end scene. So I can describe this to you because this reminds me of... Okay, so Howard gets kidnapped by the evil scientist, right? They discover a light aircraft, which they use to hunt down the Dark Overlord and the woman that Beverly, Leah Thompson, that's like his girlfriend. I don't know if it's his girlfriend or love interest, but she's a human, he's a duck. Which, again, you have the mixing of the races. Having returned to the lab, the Dark Overlord ties Beverly to a metal bed, hoping to transfer transfer another dark overlord into her body with the dimension machine. Howard and Phil return to the lab and supposedly destroy the dark overlord with an experimental, quote, neutron disintegrator laser, end quote. However, the Dark Overlord reveals itself as a monstrous stop-motion creature. Howard fires the neutron disintegrator at the beast, obliterating it. All the while, the Dimension Machine is in the process of bringing more Dark Overlords, fallen angels, to Earth, leaving Howard no choice but to destroy the machine. This results in his loss of a ride home, and blah, blah, blah. He stays on Earth. Okay, so you have a lot going on there. You have the mixing of the species, because she ends up being his girlfriend and he's their manager or whatever. And you have this laser opening a portal and bringing through dark overlords, okay? This is allegedly what some of us believe that CERN is actually doing. If you read the technical jargon and you know even basics, because physics girl, science girl, I am not. But if you read it without them, their framework, without the media telling you what it is, if you go to the CERN site and you read what the LHC is for, it's basically telling you time travel and or some type of dimensional shift. That's what it's saying. Now, that's not what they tell us, but if you go read it for yourself, that's what all that mumbo jumbo means. But I believe this is a really good, if you've not seen it, look up the last scene, the ending, because again, it explains them bringing these, and what they do first is they bring over the first Dark Overlord, and it ends up in the body of the scientist at the lab. So now they have a human operating on this side, controlling everything to bring back a bunch of them on purpose, because the first time this happened, it was an accident. But they want to bring back a bunch of them intentionally. Do you see how much the resemblance is when you replace the overlords with the fallen ones? And when you replace this neutron thing with this experimental dimension shifter, when you replace that with the LHC at CERN? Okay, so let's go back here. And I'm going to... Again, I want to see how well this aged. We're going to skim it a little more because it is 16 pages. I'm not going to be here forever reading to you guys, though, because you have things to do, I have things to do, but... Okay, so no magical thinking allowed. This is the next section, because again, most of us know the story of the fallen and all that. Several authors who write apocalyptic alternative history, and now this guy is, and again, I will read things from a different bias. This paper, this essay that was written, this is a guy who's scoffing at this, and he's saying, conspiratorially, this is how people might have this mindset. But if you look at it through a lens of today, and what we're now, this is disclosure. The Epstein files are disclosure. It's just not the kind of disclosure that people are being told it is. Like, the Epstein files are disclosure, but it's a lot bigger than just politicians. Like, read it. Read some of the, search for the fallen, search for the Nephilim, search for Gilgamesh, and see, and cloning, and see how much of that stuff comes out of the Epstein files. It is disclosure. But most people don't want to read themselves. Okay. It says, with a vision of coming apocalypse, argue that a particular reading strategy must be employed in order to reveal the true meaning of the text. This strategy often includes the assertion that one must read the text literally while avoiding symbolic or metaphorical exegesis. Will Hart, author of The Genesis Race, Our Extraterrestrial DNA and the True Origins of the Species, explains the approach demanded by the book of Genesis. No complicated supernatural interpretations, no allegorical or metaphorical leaps, and no magical thinking. On the contrary, unlocking the truth of the Bible requires a clinical approach, uncompromising logic, a fearless determination to stick to the literal meanings of the words on the page. Etymology has helped us so much on this channel, looking up the definitions of words, and the effort necessary to compare new interpretations and establish with facts of common sense. How well has that aged? It's aged well. If you look at Genesis through a scientific lens It's totally possible, especially, I mean, I can't believe they're using, and we'll talk about like ethics in another video, but they're using like tiny brains to power AI. And why do these data centers need so much water? Well, to cool them down. What else needs water? Living beings. Dude, if I find out they're using living beings to power AI and nobody does anything, and I'm a pacifist, so I'm not promoting violence. That's not what I mean. Okay, so he's saying that you have to look at it through a scientific lens. Likewise, Patrick Heron maintains in his book, The Nephilim and the Pyramid of the Apocalypse, that an interpretation such as his requires an unabashed literalness in the reading. Now, again, so they are going for the scientific. And it says, researchers of ancient mythology must develop the ability to distinguish passages that are intended to be the literal truth from those that are meant to be read as allegory or spiritual. I would agree with that. And there's a reason that the Catholic Church is put down the way it is, because they got a lot of problems. But one of the things they get right is their teaching of the verses. And they will tell you when something is spiritual. And there's different laws. There's moral laws. Those are forever. There's societal laws. Those are for that time period and that culture. So you have to look at these things through the proper lens, and you need to have some investment. You have to want to seek truth and be okay with like being corrected when you're wrong, taking 2 steps back and then restarting, because research is a lot of that. So they're saying you need to know the difference, but if you read Genesis through the scientific lens, you will see that today these things are totally possible. Now this next part, we're going to end probably this video here. It says flirting with disaster, Genesis 6:1-4 and cloning. I hate cloning. I don't agree that the people you're seeing now are clones, and I'll get to that in a different video. I have a really hard time with this because of how I feel. How, I love God and I love all beings. Like, I'm just one of those people. Call me hippy dippy. I don't care. Like, I've been through so much with all this, but it's the only reason I tell you guys about the stuff that I've been through is because there are things you have to watch for, and there are ways to mitigate all of this stuff. But you have to understand that they've been tinkering with us and our children, and chances are we have serious issues within our bodies that could affect our salvation, that could affect our hereafter. And some of these children that are hybridized or IVF children have been told that they can't be saved, that God doesn't love them. And I know that's what they're told, because that's the same thing abusers of children say. You can't say anything. No one will believe you. Everyone will hate you. Nobody loves you. And I'll hurt anyone that you love. It's abusers are abusers, and they do what abusers do. And that doesn't matter if it's in politics, if it's in government, if it's in a family. And I want you guys to watch for these things, because here's what happens. They're recruiting the kids via the internet, right? A few years ago, we had this thing called blood over intent, where everybody was cutting themselves on film. I'm not sure why that does something, but it does. I believe that was the consent that they needed, because what they were doing was saying they were bringing heaven to earth. You don't want to do that. You're tempting the angels. You're inviting them again down and giving them consent for a second incursion. But these kids all did this several years ago. So I think that things of that nature combined with CERN. Now what happens is they're recruiting kids through things like Cicada, if you're a decode breaker, this, that, and the other. I told you about this with the Slender Man series. It always starts out with athleticism. They encourage these kids to work out. Nothing wrong with that. Great. I did the same with my children. I've always been wanting to stay as in shape as I can, no matter what age I am. Having said that, these children are encouraged to go to the max. That's what look maxing is about. And they are breaking their skin. They are putting things into their bodies that don't belong in the human body. And we're going to start to see a lot of evidence of that. Don't you already see celebrities looking different? These things are starting to show on the outside. So it starts out, they'll recruit these kids online. They get them into like this type of idolatry. You know, they get them working out a lot. Great, nothing wrong with that. But they're not feeding their spirit. And then something happens where I don't know if it's substances or supplements that they're taking, but all of the young adults in that community, in the body aesthetic community, I don't even know what to call it, in the workout to the extreme, in the look maxing, but it's more than that. Like I said, just like they encouraged me and they wanted me to give my child hormones to make him grow because he was a year behind. I'm 5 foot. He's not going to get that tall. These individuals are here now, right? And this is what you're seeing. And I can't say who can be saved or who won't be saved, so I'm not telling you to hate any of these people or anything like that. I'm telling you they have been raised and weaponized against the human race because they hate God, and they've been told that God doesn't love them and that they can't have no access to heaven. And again, this is how abusers work. But you have to start understanding the Norse mentality, the old Egyptian Babylonian mentality, the Sumerian mentality. They treat us like less than pets. Some of these fallen ones that want to lord over us, literally, they treat us worse than pets. I know, because I'm treated that way because I believe my family either has attachments. Now what happens is when they get them into these communities with the look maxing and the Joe Rogan and the doing certain tasks and following these treasure hunts, they're grooming them. They're initiating them into secret societies. How do I know? Just like with the Slender Man. That kid had to stand in the same position, like a court gesture, with a funny hat on, his one arm up, one arm down on one leg. For hours. They filmed an initiation. This affects the world. For some reason, again, just like the blood over intent, all of these things have attributed to the LHC and how well it's functioning. I hope that makes sense. And anyone that's human that's doing these things, we have more consent here on Earth because Earth is ours. And this is what they don't like me telling you. The Earth is ours. They have no claim to it. They're not supposed to be here. This is not their domain. So if we, technically speaking, if you gave one of the fallen ones orders, and it's, inhabited one of your family members or whoever, and you start telling it what to do, it has to listen to you because you're above it in the hierarchy. Now, if you fall in frequency because you sin or transgress, you're then on their level. This is all about consent. Please learn how to wield your free will appropriately. These things do not have to be lording over us or running rampant on the media. None of these things have to be going on. And please understand that a lot of your favorite YouTubers are of these ilk. They've either signed on with them knowingly or they are them. They have consented to being taken over by them. Again, if all you're doing is watching Israel and the war that's going on, they already have you in a form of idolatry because the fallen ones are the ones who taught physical warfare. We shouldn't be watching that. Pray for people, absolutely, but we're not supposed to participate. And we haven't learned anything from the history that we've read. Even those of us now who say, oh, I'm a Bible believer. Man, why are you sitting there watching war like it's a sport? Why are you participating in this? We should not be participating in these shenanigans. Flirting with disaster, Genesis 6, 1 through 4, and cloning. One way to read Genesis 6, 1 through 4 is as a theological discourse about the improper mixing of categories, heavenly beings and earthly beings. And you know this with certain dog breeds, right? You'll get certain breeds together that you should not breed, and they have health problems then. Just like the people that are giants or have gigantism or whatever they call it. They have bone problems. A lot of the taller dogs, like labs, they will have hip problems. And this happens because we interfere with nature thinking that we know better or something. And it's just ridiculous. Okay. The heavenly beings and the earthly beings acted outside of the bounds of God's established order. By doing so, the offspring of their union was unnatural, neither fully angelic nor fully human, and were literally monsters. They have no authentic and divinely sanctioned identity of their own. I'm sorry, I feel so sad. Because some of us, we just don't know who we are, right? They have no authentic and divinely sanctioned identity of their own that fits within the ordered cosmos. I'm pretty sure if you have brown hair and brown eyes, as strange as this sounds, I'm pretty sure you're okay if you don't know like your DNA genetics. At a basic level, the arguments produced by the authors examined here agree with this common theological perspective, though they are updated to reflect the anxieties of the modern age, specifically the improper tampering with established categories, be they angel, human, alien, human, leads to disaster. Moreover, this speculation based in Genesis 6:1-4 raises questions about who has the legitimate right to create life. In the biblical narrative, the answer is God, and any creative acts occurring outside his purview are disastrous. Thus, the theologically Christian treatises by authors such as Thomas Horn examine the question, who are we really? Are we the creation of a benevolent creator, or are we the result of some misguided experiment on the part of a paraphysical, or in some formulations, alien race? In the hands of the authors of these apocalyptic alternative histories, the argument that Genesis 6 is an ancient record of genetic experimentation reveals deep anxiety regarding what it means to be authentically human. This speculation goes one step further in mirroring the moral and ethical debates concerning cloning and genetic experimentation. Are we humans, through our use of science, to become the new sons of God and engage in imprudent attempts to create life? And should we do so, what might be the disastrous results? Fully understanding the manner in which genetic experimentation is incorporated into these apocalyptic cultural products requires understanding the long-term goals of genetic experimentation and how those goals are interpreted in the theologies of the authors of apocalyptic alternative history. One thing that Marzulli and all of them miss, and I've not read a lot of their stuff, I skim, I take what I need. I don't want my mind too influenced by other people's words. I want to come to my own conclusions. They don't mention certain things in their studies, and I think that that's folly. They steer away from certain subtopics, I guess, regarding the genetic tampering, and it's, I can't decide if they're being intentionally nefarious or not, because my problem with all this is that all of this has gone mainstream, and when things go mainstream, I become suspicious of them. But again, because everybody knows about the Book of Enoch now, they could just be running damage control ops, and everything you see now is them just trying their last-ditch efforts. Now, I'm disappointed that they don't bring up, and I wanted to go ahead a sentence just to see if they did. I'm upset that they did not bring up or mention Project Paperclip and the Nazis that were brought over, because at least for the United States, as far as on paper, that is when the genetic experimentation started in the United States in this modern era. Before that, it would be hard to pin down probably the world fairs, right? So now they're talking about replacing genes, and that's what I wanted to get to. I think that the giant thing is degenerative. Do I think some are still here? Absolutely. But I also think it's degenerative. I think I work with kids. I live by people that I know are of this ilk. I know. And I still love them. It doesn't mean I look at them. I don't trust them, because I know that how they've been raised, and I know their goal is to hurt mankind, especially women. That's why Disney and all the Disney movies, the mom, where's the mom? So we've talked about that too, though. Now, I'm going to end this video there. I want you guys to go watch the Howard the Duck scene if you have not seen it, because we're going to check back in with CERN soon. I'm going to read the rest of this paper and see how it ends. This guy injects a lot of his own opinions and bias, which whatever. Oh, no, wait, hold on. If you left, I'm sorry. Sometimes they come back, and then we'll stop this video. According to the authors examined here, even though the Watchers' efforts to corrupt the human genome, and again, I've looked everywhere for some agreement that there's a second incarnation aside from just the Bible, right? Because I can't say the Bible's true and then use the Bible to prove itself. People do that, but that's not the way it's supposed to be. I don't think that's the way it's supposed to be done. Yes, definitions and stuff should be done that way, but you can't. I needed more evidence, and this person seems to have the same thought, or at least they're going over the same theories. So according to the authors examined here, even though the Watchers' efforts to corrupt the human genome in order to subvert the birth of the Messiah failed, there is little reason to believe the fallen angels have lost interest in genetic engineering. Thomas Horn argues that the satanic efforts to corrupt the human genome will come to fruition in a different way, in the form of the Antichrist, whom Horn believes to be an incarnation of Apollyon. Revelation 9:3, the destroyer from the Hebrew Abaddon, sometimes associated with Apollo. Again, a lot of people are saying this is their own research now. This has been around since at least 2009. So anyone, people are regurgitating a lot. Do your own research, guys. Read. It pays off. It is through this anticipated coming of the Antichrist and the fulfillment of the events in the New Testament book of Revelation that Horn arrives at the significance of the year 2012. Oh, a reference to Christmas. I think it's a reference to how much... Okay, listen to this. This is different. It is through this anticipated coming of the Antichrist and the fulfillment of the events described in the New Testament book of Revelation that Horn arrives at the significance of the year 2012. I don't know how he does this. Horn does this by linking together seemingly random figures and numbers to argue that December 21, 2012 will be the midpoint of the Great Tribulation. The midpoint? I hope, yeah. Okay. Anyway, we've talked on this channel about the tribulation possibly being 40 years, like a generation, not just 7 years. But anyway. Okay, he says, and I've never heard anyone put it this way, but I'll read it to you guys. I disagree with it, but I'll read it. Horn ultimately settles on December 21st, 2012 because of a textual reference in Revelation in which the two witnesses of Revelation are killed and lie in the streets for 3.5 days while the people celebrate and exchange gifts. Horn believes this to be a reference to Christmas. Do you guys see it that way? I've never thought of that. I thought that because if you read what comes next, if you read it in context, they're hated. They hate the two witnesses, right? So I thought that they exchange gifts because they throw a party because they're no longer here prophesying, right? And bringing down, because they can bring a plague, they can bring rain, they could bring sun, they could bring snow, they could bring the weather, right? So, and anyone that tries to do them harm will fall down dead. So I thought that they were exchanging gifts just because they were that disliked. Interesting. I don't know. Okay, so this other person, author David Flynn, links it also to 2012, but for a different reason. He links these events to the year 2012 by noting that the mountain upon which the sons of God were thought to have descended, Mount Hermon, is 33.33 degrees or 2,012 miles from the equator. Where do they come up with all these numbers, though, that they just... What would that have to do with... I don't know. This is where I need conversation because I don't know how I feel about some of this interpretation. Oh. In the words of Dante, okay, as the days of Noah were the sons of God in the coming apocalypse, whatever happened in the beginning is going to happen in the end. Nothing new under the sun. The end will mimic the beginning. Right. Gilbert, 2011. I agree with that. What do you guys think? Obviously, we were wrong about people were wrong about 2012, but I thought interesting to look at this and see how it aged, because this guy he's very suspicious and he's very critical, right? Like, he's not going along with this at all, or any of this thought process. He's probably not a Bible believer. This guy's more of a university guy, so he's a scientist or a professor, theologian, probably, but for a different, for science. I think he's been proven wrong, and I don't think this paper aged very well, because a lot of the stuff that he scoffed at, we're seeing with our own eyes at this time. Now, let me make sure I didn't have anything else to mention with the Howard the Duck thing. I know that sounds funny, but again, we're going to take another look at CERN here soon. And don't forget to watch Shiprock. Watch that area, the Four Corners. Okay, so the Dark Overlords, real quick, of Howard the Duck. When you go watch the last scene, go watch the final scene. I mean, you can watch the whole thing and just replace Howard, he's Neo or Christ, and these Dark Overlords. And what I find really interesting is the first one that comes by accident, he ends up possessing the scientist. But the other ones that they bring are these cockroach-looking like things with all these teeth. So why in the one part was he possessed, but then it's actually they have physical bodies? I think it's because the portal wasn't all the way open. They said it was an error, but I thought that was interesting. Okay, so the Dark Overlords, these are the ones they're trying to pull through, which would be the Fallen, they're an ancient evil force and the overarching antagonist of Howard the Duck, franchised by Marvel Comics, serving as the main antagonists. They are giant, mawed, scorpion-like creatures, as they're shown in the movie. They have a combination of the most terrifying features from the most terrifying creatures known to man. Do you hear what they said there? Giant creatures, scorpion-like. Does that remind you of a verse at the end of the Bible too? This is wild. So the species is they're a type of alien dark lords. Their crimes are abuse of power, possession, attempted universal hegemony, attempted omnicide. Interesting. Goals rule the entire universe. So again, I thought that very interesting. And their abilities: vast dark powers, elemental abilities, lasers, possession, and telekinesis. We're gonna continue with the Portal talk too. I'm gonna do a shorter video tomorrow or later today about another movie and portals. Again, it's just trying to get across to us everyday layman people these scientific concepts using movies and pop culture to understand them. But I do have another movie that I wanted to mention, and so we're gonna look at that next too. We're always looking at the map and the areas. We're always keeping our eyes on a little bit of everything. We don't want to get stuck in any one paradigm, because then we get tunnel vision and we miss a lot that way. And I think that's our biggest problem today, is just how busy that we are kept. So you guys have a blessed day. Please pray for me as I pray for you. Have conversation. I welcome people to all the time. It is, of course, discouraging, but I feel compelled and led to do certain videos, so I do them. You guys, and we're not supposed to give up. We're supposed to keep trying to have fellowship and have people in our lives. And if it makes other people feel good about manipulating my life behind the scenes, just remember that that's not a forever thing. You don't get to do this forever.